Hello, everyone. I'm Ben Johnson, and this is the Perpetual Chess Podcast. On Perpetual Chess, I have weekly conversations with the chess world's best players, promoters, and educators about their lives, careers, current projects, and best practices. Perpetual Chess is brought to you through the generosity of its Patreon and PayPal supporters. For more information, go to perpetualchesspod.com. Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Perpetual Chess. We have another rising young chess player joining us this week. He is number 6 in the U.S., under the age of 21, one of the country's youngest grandmasters. He's won national championships, the Marshall Chess Club Championship, which might be just as hard to win, if not harder. He recently was the co-champion of the Charity Chess Blitz tournament, which I talked about with Scott and Norm Amaro a few months ago. Nico Checa, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Ben. It's a privilege.
So it's good to have the younger generation represented here. I know we got to chat a little, not at this charity chess event, but 2 charity chess events ago. And you were young and strong then, and you've gotten even stronger since then. So what have you been doing, Nico? What's your approach to working on chess?
Well, so last year I was still in IM, so at that point I was very much committed towards getting my norms and trying to get all the requirements for the GM title. But this year, since I already satisfied that, I was able to just really enjoy chess a little more, and I think that's might have been why I performed a lot better this year.
Interesting. So do you feel like you put a lot of pressure on yourself generally?
I think pressure is the wrong word, but I think my goal in chess at that point was exclusively the norms and the title and everything. And now that is behind me, I can focus on other things, focus on the enjoyment of the game, focusing on just getting better as a player. It's a different mindset.
So what were the practical implications of being focused on the title? Did it impact your study more or your tournament selection or what?
I think it had the biggest impact on the tournament selection because there are obviously, a lot of requirements in terms of the number of foreign players and the number of rounds and all that sort of thing in terms of what tournaments are and aren't eligible for norms. So I would almost play exclusively 9-round tournaments that had sufficient number of foreigners and had sufficient number of title players and all that, with the goal of potentially getting a norm. But now I can kind of vary my tournament selection to tournaments that I would enjoy playing more, or I would find some sort of competitive urge to go to it. It's a different mindset.
Okay, so Nico, now that you have the norms out of the way, what would be an example of a tournament that you might play that you wouldn't have otherwise?
I most likely would not have played in nationals this year had I not had the title, because that time, that trip, that tournament, that time off school would have been better spent at a tournament which could have had a more direct benefit to me. Whereas I just was I wanted to kind of challenge myself against the top high schoolers and see how I would fare. So that's why I went to nationals. And if I didn't have the title, I most likely would not have gone there. Okay. So that's the example of a tournament that I chose to go to afterwards.
And you've won national titles in the past, right?
This was actually only my second time playing in nationals, because I typically chose not to play when I was much younger. So I played in 2 years ago when I was a freshman in high school, and then I won the Blitz that year, but I was did pretty poorly in the regular event. And then this year I played. So this was my second time and my first time ever winning.
Oh, wow. Cool. So I saw that the other top 17-year-olds, I mean, obviously there's so many strong young players these days, but it looked like the 2 closest to your rating, or maybe slightly higher than you, were Ruifeng Li and John Michael Burke.
Yes.
So have you guys crossed swords frequently over the years?
Yeah, we I've played each of them, at least 5-10 times maybe. So we've played each other a lot in both the cadets and the juniors and all that stuff, and also just in regular Swisses. I think we play a lot of the same tournaments because we are both looking for the same things in our tournaments. So it's just bound to happen that we face each other. I remember there was in particular Ruifeng, there was a summer in which I think I might have played him 3 or 4 times in the whole summer. So I've played a lot of them quite frequently.
And what are the dynamics like? When do you tend to switch openings, or do you just go deeper into the prep when you're preparing for one of your frequent strong opponents?
Well, it's different between the two of them, because Ruifeng's kind kind of approach is much more original. His openings vary a lot more. So typically, he will change openings before you even get the chance to.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas John is a little more principled in his approach. So John tends to be a more theoretical player than Ruifeng, in my opinion. So I think preparation plays a bigger role when you're playing him. But they both know their openings very well, so you have to be on your toes.
Okay, but do you have a preference for prepping for one of them? I think if I were you, I would rather just play the one where I was like, I have no idea what he's going to play, so I'm not even going to worry about it being Ruifeng.
I think they're both obviously 25-50 grandmasters. They're very tough opponents. So I think you can't say that one is easier or harder than the other. I think both of them are just enormous challenge to play.
Yeah, I wasn't saying easier. I was just saying in terms of prep, in terms of like the feeling before the round.
In terms of prep, I think they're just. I guess I wouldn't say one of them is easier to prep than the other because, in one you have to prepare for a lot of different things at a lower intensity, but the other you have to prepare high intensity narrow. So it winds up being about the same amount of preparation you need to do. That
makes sense. And is there anyone I'm sort of leaving out from the conversation that you would consider, like along with those two, as your? I mean, I don't know if you want to call them rivals, because of course I'm sure you guys, you're often friendly in situations like that. But you know what I mean.
I think Praveen Balakrishnan is my age too, and he's an IM, so he's usually up there in those. I played him a couple times. There are a lot of players who have either Advait Patel. I think he might be 6 months younger than me, but he's a strong IM who's close to getting his GM title. So there's a number of players who are around that level.
Okay, yeah, it's crazy how strong you guys all are. And you mentioned that basically you decided to play nationals because it was more. You weren't as focused on getting your title, but one thing I wonder about, because this was a thing like back when I was a teenager, but I don't know if it still matters for someone as strong as you are. Like if you were trying to get a feather in your cap for applying to colleges and stuff like that, does being a national champion, do you think it matters, or is it like you've accomplished enough chess-wise that it's kind of just another thing?
I really don't like the kind of mindset that you've accomplished enough in any field. I think there's always more that you can do. So within this context, it wasn't so much trying to pad a resume or anything. It was definitely just something that I had never accomplished that before, and I wanted to challenge myself against the top high schoolers. In terms of perception, I think the title of Grandmaster is well known to some people, but kind of vaguely known to others. So depending on how well entrenched you are in the chess world, some people will automatically understand what that means, and others will they don't really understand what it comes with. Whereas national high school champion, or New York State high school champion, or any title, or any other state for that matter, is a little easier to understand because you can usually compare it to, say, basketball or track or some sport that almost everyone understands. Whereas there really is not a comparable title of Grandmaster in many other things.
Oh, that makes sense. Although I would think that with, I don't know. I mean, I guess there's colleges versus like the, broader populace trying to understand things. But with colleges, I would think there've been enough strong chess players along the way where maybe they would have figured it out by now. But I mean, it's certainly, Grandmaster just sounds good. That's one of the good things about chess, is even if you don't play it, it's a good sounding title.
But it's very hard to explain kind of what a Grandmaster is or how you become a Grandmaster.
It is. That's familiar. That's true. Yeah.
If you try to explain what a norm is, it's very hard to explain with all these narrow requirements. It's a little artificial, but at the same time, it is known to some people, so that's good.
Yeah. So Nico, are you finishing up your junior year of high school?
Yeah, I have about 2 or 3 weeks left.
Okay, and I'm sure you get tired of being asked all the stuff about your future and stuff like that. But I mean, I have to ask: are you thinking you're on the college track or the pro chess track or what?
I fully intend to go to college. I don't think going professional chess is the path for me right now. I think academics and college is something that I'd be more inclined to pursue.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, not that you asked, but I think that's a good decision on your part. And what about the chess colleges? I mean, I've had, of course, many guests over the years who were fortunate enough to get chess scholarships, but then, of course, there's also some who, as you mentioned, sort of an academic track who decide that they rather prefer sort of a more typical college experience. Have you given much thought to where you would go?
I'm more inclined to pursue an academic track, I'd say.
Okay. And do you how are you as a regular student, non-chess student, I should say?
I mean, I think I go to school every day. I'm not homeschooled, so that is a bit of a pull away from chess. But school's fine. I go to Dobbs Ferry High School, so it's a fun time.
Are you thinking about specific colleges or not yet?
I'm trying to stay open-minded right now.
Cool, good for you. And so you mentioned that you're not homeschooled, which these days is a bit of a differentiator, I think, for a lot of players of your caliber. So what did you ever consider? You were obviously, this would be a family decision. I met your dad last week as well. Shout out to your dad.
Yes.
Did you ever consider not going to school?
I never really considered it seriously because I think the main reason people decide to do it, I don't mean to put words in anyone's mouth, but I think the reason is that not so much the amount of time per day to study or anything, because in my understanding is that people do a lot of academics at home. It's more the issues with missing a week here, a week there to go to a tournament, because a lot of schools, particularly public schools, are very strict about that because they get the government funding based on how many students they have present and all that. So a lot of schools really just at some point put their foot down and say you can't miss all these days to go to tournaments. And then a player would respond by saying, okay, well, I'll be homeschooled, and then that way I have the freedom to travel to Europe to play a tournament or to go to a World Youth or even just go play 9-round Swisses in the U.S. But since I was I tried to always play my tournaments around holidays, like put the Philadelphia Open around Easter, National Chess Congress around Thanksgiving, North American Open around Christmas. So the amount of days I missed for school was usually pretty minimal. So there really was never that tension between me and the school.
Oh, that's a really interesting insight. I hadn't thought about that. I mean, I do feel like it would probably open up some time to study more homeschooled. You could probably be a little more efficient with your schoolwork, and of course travel time, stuff like that makes a difference. I mean, it would de-emphasize any sort of organized high school sports. But yeah, I hadn't thought about that aspect. That makes a lot of sense.
I think it's a big sacrifice to miss out on all that of your life, but that's a personal decision. So it's
I mean, I feel that way, but not everyone would agree with that. I mean, some people, high school can cut both ways for sure. I mean, school generally, so.
Definitely true. But, it's a personal decision, and I chose to stay in school.
So have there been any big tournaments that you really were bummed to miss because of school?
There's been a number of invitational tournaments in St. Louis, both the Norm events and their St. Louis Classic events, which particularly because they're one game a day, they would be maybe 9 or 10 days, which is really not reasonable. So I am unfortunately kind of obligated to decline a lot of those invitations. So I think that's the first example that I can think of. But I haven't gone to very many World Youths since I started. I haven't gone to any World Youths since I started high school. So I think I did cut down on my travel and my tournaments once I got into high school. That's also because at that point, like I said before, the set of tournaments that I was interested in began to narrow because I began to pursue norms. So those two things were happening at the same time. So it's hard to really pin one as the root cause.
Yeah, I think the World Youths in particular seem to me like that would be that might be fun to go to. I mean, the Norm Invitationals, that seems like those would be fun too. But if I'm guessing you could imagine what it would be like, away from the board. Do you think that it slowed down your getting your titles, this decision?
I think it's hard to. I don't think so, because I think that the way I was not, my playing frequency did not decrease to such an extent that it would have affected it. I was still playing, like I said, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, all these tournaments around the February break I would play. So I still had, a number of opportunities to get norms, but I just wasn't taking advantage of them until basically last summer. So I don't think that's the reason. I think I had some gaps in my play that I had to address, and then once I did that, I was able to finally do it.
So what were the gaps?
I think that to some extent I wasn't playing practically enough. I think it was a matter of just really approaching the game in a different mindset, that I was able to know which games I was really trying to win, to know which games that I had to hold with black, for example. I think before then I didn't have a clear goal going into every game. And then more recently, particularly in my last tournament, I knew more or less ahead of time which games I said, this game I'm going to try to win, this game I'm going to try to hold with black, and just kind of approach the tournament through that way, which it's pretty, some people think it's a horrible way of approaching it, but it's worked for me. So that's how I like to do things.
Yeah, it's probably a more professional approach, whether people want to admit it or not. I mean, part of the skill of a chess tournament is, the sort of macro planning and energy management.
Right.
So how did you figure this out? Like, your dad mentioned to me that you don't have a coach. So how were you able to pinpoint that as what you needed to work on?
Well, because I was in a lot of tournaments. For example, I played a tournament in Texas called the Southwest Open, I think, and in that tournament, I wound up being half a point away from getting a norm. And looking back, I realized that in round 2, I was playing someone who was lower rated than me, but only maybe 80 points lower. And I was white and was really pushing for a win, and then ultimately lost because I took some unnecessary risks. And then although I later managed to salvage the tournament and come back and have a good enough performance, what I realized is that that risk I took, that loss, was really unmerited. The risk reward proposition was not justified, and it would have made much more sense to just understand the context of the tournament, the circumstances better, and realize that a draw in that game, although it was with white against a slightly weaker player, was not really that bad. I just needed to kind of stay composed in that sense, and then I would have had ample opportunity to, win games later on, which I didn't really have that perspective at the time. But I think once I gained that perspective, my results improved a lot.
Huh. I mean, even hearing you talk about it, it strikes me as a pretty mature perspective for a 17-year-old. So it's good that you're learning those lessons. So you mentioned you felt like you were able to implement them in your last tournament. What was your last tournament?
Well, my last norm tournament was a round robin in Charlotte.
Oh, okay.
And I think a good example of that would be in round 3, I played Alex Katz. I'm not sure if you've had him on the podcast. He's a IM.
I haven't, but I follow him on Twitter. He's a strong young player. Goes to MIT, right?
He might have graduated, but
okay.
So I was playing him, and I was white, so I was obviously pushing, and it got to a point where I was beginning to get a serious advantage, and then at that point I made a horrible blunder, basically. So I went from pushing to a serious advantage to, having to basically try to hold for a draw in a difficult circumstance, which I managed to find the right sequence of moves to make it basically dead equal. And at that point, we were both relatively low on time, so he offered me a draw. And I think in previous, kind of maybe 6 months prior, I would have felt that, since I had been better the whole game and now it was equal, I should have, continued to push, or that I should have taken some sort of risk because he was in time trouble. But I had the perspective to realize that, it's only round 3. There's plenty of opportunity afterwards in the subsequent rounds to win games and to reach the point that I needed. So it would make much more sense to just I hate to say cut my losses, but basically realized that the risk associated with pushing in that position where I was probably slightly worse objectively was definitely not justified.
Yeah, that's got to be one of the hardest parts of chess, and it's why I think there's no substitute for just playing. Like no matter how many tactics you do, no matter how many books you read, those sort of decisions can't really be faked.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's a lot of that stuff is it's hard to explain and it's hard to prepare yourself for.
Yeah, and of course you're doing it at a very high level, but even for listeners at a lower level, that stuff matters a lot. I mean, like if someone a little higher rated offers a draw early in a game, you have to figure out, is it because they're, are they tired? Do they have to skip town, or am I missing something on the board?
Yeah,
and it's
so
just
it's that kind of gamesmanship aspect of it where you need to figure it out.
Yeah. So what's your next tournament, Nico?
My next tournament is probably going to be the U.S. Junior in July in St. Louis. I might play a tournament before then, almost just to prepare and get ready. But that's my next major tournament.
Awesome. Yeah, that I mean, you must be excited for it. As a chess fan, I'm excited for it. So we can obviously, I could make some educated guesses, but who do you know for sure is playing?
I'm not sure if they've released the list of players yet, but I think there's several strong players that are playing. It's definitely the strongest that they've ever had.
Wow. Yeah. And Greg Shahade, I was just, as I told you before we started recording, was texting with him. And when I had him on, he kind of teased that this might happen, but the fabled camp with, the esteemed trainer, GM Jakob Agard, is happening. And you're attending that as well, right? After
I'm very, very excited about that. I've read a lot of his books and I've heard great things about his training, so I'm excited to meet him in person and work with him a little bit.
Yeah, what an opportunity. That should be something special. So you've got the summer coming up. When does your school year end?
My last exam is on June 25th, actually, so it's going to go for a little while longer. But my classes end next Monday, so
okay, so that helps a little. Yes. And do you historically do you hit the chess harder in the summer, or kind of same approach?
I usually play more tournaments in the summer because I think there are more tournaments to play in general. They're especially on the East Coast, they're much more accessible in the summer, and also I don't have to worry about missing school or anything, so it's much easier for me to do it. So I usually play, maybe usually 3 to 5 9-round tournaments. So that's a lot for a summer.
Yeah, and are you playing the Philly International and the World Open, or do those conflict with your schedule?
I think I'm only going to play one of them, and I think just the Philadelphia International, because the World Open I think goes almost the day right up to the junior, so I would be hard to travel and do all that in the one day in between.
Yeah, and speaking of conserving energy, that might be penny wise and pound foolish. So Nico, I know that obviously a lot of people are wondering what your tricks are for getting so good so young. I mean, why don't you take us through your history a little bit? When you were exposed to chess, did you kind of have good results right away relative to your age, or is it something that came a little slower?
Well, so I was first, taught the moves, like how the knight moves, how the pawn moves, all that. When I think I was 4. My dad taught me just how to play, because he also taught my sister, who was 4 years older than me, when she was 4. So that was kind of a rite of passage in our family, I guess you could say. And I was, it was just kind of a casual family thing. I wasn't very serious about it. I think I might have played a few tournaments in the, just local scholastic tournaments. I don't think I did particularly well in that. I think I maybe got 3 out of 4 or 2.5 out of 4 or something like that. So it was just, I was just going to enjoy it, and I had fun. And then in elementary school, I think I was in 1st or 2nd grade. A friend of mine, during our free time session, he took out a chess set, and I thought I know what's going on here. I can try. And although I did win that game, it was, alarmingly close for 1st grade me. I was very concerned that I almost lost. So then I came home and I think I downloaded the Chess Master software, which you could play against the computer of increasing intervals of strength. And I think for almost a week I was just kept playing that. And then I guess you could say that's how I really started. And then I went back to these local scholastic tournaments and had much better results. And then eventually the organizers encouraged me to, set my sights larger and visit the Marshall Chess Club. So I did that. And then gradually one thing led to another.
Gotcha. That's interesting. I mean, the whole thing is interesting, especially the self-taught, like practicing against Chess Master. So I want to get back to that in a second. But another question I had, because this has come up a few times where people there's almost something inborn, it feels like, for people who love chess. Like when they discover it, it's just like it's almost a force bigger than them. But some people know about tournaments right away and some people don't. So do you know how your dad knew that the tournaments were a thing that happened? Was he a competitive player?
Well, because my sister, who's 4 years older than me, had played in them also.
Okay.
So
that makes sense.
I don't know how he figured them out for her, but I remember in these tournaments you had to be in kindergarten or older to play. So I remember going to them before I was in kindergarten, and I would just kind of mill around the skills area, I guess you could say. But I couldn't play because I wasn't old enough. And then once I was old enough, I started to play. But so I was always kind of familiar with that scene.
Gotcha. And then once you once you really in first grade, and once you start playing Chess Master and sort of expanding your horizons, as you surprised at that point, I mean, I know you won some titles like pretty young. So at what point did you sort of shoot towards the top of your age range?
Well, I remember my first or second time going to the Marshall Chess Club. A lot of the kids, who were maybe a year older than me or my age were like much, much higher rated than me because they had, I guess, been exposed to the New York City chess scene for their, entire, career, I guess. So I was maybe, 1,200, something like that. And they were, I'd say maybe 1,800. So they were, and that 600 point gap is a big gap. So they were much, much better than me at the time. But I think I just, at the time I was very into chess. I was reading all these books. I was playing Chess Master, although I stopped doing that at some point. But I was just studying a lot. I was playing a lot. I was learning a lot, and I progressed pretty quickly. I think the first time I qualified for a World Youth, I believe I was in fourth grade. So it took me like 3 years to reach that level. But it was something I absolutely loved. So it was all good. It was all fun.
Nice. Yeah, that's must have been a fun time to think back on. So what are some of the books that resonated with you the most as a kid, plowing through all this chess material?
I remember I was, I was very young at the time, so I really, a lot of times didn't understand or didn't fully grasp what the meaning of these, books with lots of text and all this kind of abstract concepts. So I remember I would really just try to plow through these games collections. I think there was a games collection that was a compilation of Topalov, Geller, and Tal, I think, that all three of their games, that was together in one book. And I remember I really went through that in maybe like 3 or 4 days or something. I was really I would just input them on the computer and play through them and try to figure out what was going on. So I think at that time I wasn't really capable of really, I guess, understanding like, the deeper kind of text-based, like, like let's say some of Dvoretsky's books, but I was very, very into games collections at that point.
Wow, that's amazing because, I teach a lot of kids chess that age, and I generally steer them towards kids' books. Just because, like you say, the language itself can be, inaccessible. So,
yeah, I think it was inaccessible for me at that point. So that's why I tended to, kind of go towards the games collections, which are, once you can read algebraic notation, you more or less can understand all of it.
And if you couldn't figure, did you use an engine in looking at the games as you input them on the computer?
Sometimes I would, yeah. I would sometimes. I think I had a very weak engine at the time. It was one of those old like Fritz 3s or something. But it was obviously many orders of magnitude stronger than I was, so it was definitely fun.
Even a weak engine, it helps so much when you have that feeling like I'm missing a tactic. Like, when you're looking at a position and you're like, all right, why doesn't this hang a piece or something?
Yeah.
But that's amazing. And do you remember, was this when you went through this book in 3 or 4 days, was this during the school year or over the summer? Was it like...
This was during the school year, but it was I think second grade, third grade maybe, so it was not, I wasn't burdened with, much schoolwork, so I'd just come home and do that. It wasn't like, I didn't really need to worry about homework or anything at the time.
Gotcha. And did your parents, once they saw that you had this passion, was it something that they tried to sort of promote, or did they just kind of let you do your thing?
No, they definitely promoted it. My dad took me to, tournaments, and he was very enthusiastic. He was very supportive, and he helped me a tremendous amount. Like, he still does help me a lot, but he has helped me a tremendous amount throughout my career. Okay.
And what any other books that stand out besides the Topalov, Geller, and Tal book that you mentioned?
There were, as I got older and was able to kind of understand them more, there was several Michal Marin books. I don't remember the names, but those were very, very fascinating. And then in recent years, the Jacob Agard books have been, I think, very helpful for me.
Yeah, I haven't read it. I'm somewhat ashamed to admit, but a lot of people speak highly of Michal Marin. I think it's called Learn from the Masters or something like that.
That might be the title, yeah.
Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, he kind of takes one component of a lot of different players' play. So I think he talks about, Akiba Rubinstein's dominance of the 7th rank, for example, in Ruifeng, and then, maybe Bobby Fischer's kind of bishop sacrifice into So's and Sicilian. So each player, each world champion, or each kind of legendary player, he would try to focus on a narrow attribute of theirs.
Oh, good approach for a book.
Yes.
Break things down into small pieces. So that's interesting to hear that you read so many books, because when I was thinking about this interview, I was thinking like, you came of age basically almost fully in the computer generation. So how much have you used computers, and how has that changed as you continue to get stronger?
I think I really only started using computers properly, I think, or as close to properly in the past couple of years, because I think before then it's a little overkill to be using an engine to prepare, because at that point you really just need to, as long as you're not losing in the opening, you really have a fighting chance when you're a Class A player or something. But once I was competing for norms and such, I think it was necessary to start preparing with the computer and trying to really understand the subtleties of things.
Okay, so do you have ChessBase now, or do you use a different program?
I've had ChessBase for many years.
Okay.
I don't know how long, but since I was very young.
Mm-hmm. And figuring this stuff out, so without having a coach, have you found it hard over time to sort of know what to work on or what to read next, and like what to take from your games and stuff like that?
I don't think so, because people are, in my experience, they've always been very friendly and kind with their advice. Even kind of the title players or grandmasters that I kind of encounter, they'd always be very helpful in suggesting, you should work on this, you should check out this book or this opening or something. So people, in my experience, they were never stingy with their advice. So it was great to just catch like a little piece of advice from one person, another person, and try to combine that all together and improve my game.
That's good to hear that people were so generous. I'm putting you on the spot a bit here, but can you think of any specific examples of times where you played a stronger player and they said you should read this book or you should work on this particular thing?
I don't want to, I don't want to give credit to one person, because I feel like that'd be taking credit away from everyone else. But it was widespread. A lot of people were very kind, and I'm very thankful to them.
And that's good to hear. And so, okay, as you transition to computers and, at your level, obviously, being strong tactically is extremely important. I mean, you don't get to 2600 USCF without great ability to visualize. So what was your approach for tactics? Did you use computers for that? Did you use tactics books or a combination or what?
I was a little bit of both. I'd say. I think most kids my age have done their fair share of chess tempo tactics or chess.com tactics or some sort of online tactics trainer. But then there are also, all the puzzle books. There's the Laszlo Polgar puzzle book of I think 3,000 positions, which I did the whole thing when I was much younger. So I think there's a little bit of both. I did my fair share of online tactics, but I also did tactics books. I was told that the tactics books were generally better because they had explanations. You can definitely be exposed to many more kind of ideas, many more tactics online because the databases are much larger than a book.
And have you been bitten by the Puzzle Rush bug, Nico?
I do Puzzle Rush a fair amount. A lot of times if it's just on my phone if I'm in the car or something, but I'm not at the level of trying to memorize them yet, which is from what I gathered the new wave. My score is not that high. It's just something I just do almost a pastime.
Yeah, it's funny how people are hacking Puzzle Rush.
Yeah, I think it's I'd imagine it's it takes a lot of skill to do, so it's not something that I think I would be cut out for.
Well, I mean, you might be able to do it, but there's probably an opportunity cost. What do you consider your strength as a player?
In terms of Puzzle Rush?
No, sorry. Like generally in chess, are you a tactical player, positional player? Like what was the most naturally strong aspect of your game?
Generally speaking, I think I attempted. I don't know if I succeeded, but I attempted to try to develop as a pretty well-rounded player. I think these days my openings are typically kind of resulting in more closed positions where there's more, I guess, positional opportunities. But a lot of those closed positions are deceptive in the sense that they can really explode to life very quickly. So I think they kind of combine a lot of different attributes.
Okay. And getting back to tactics for a second. So now that you've come as far as you have, now if you wanted to work on them, what would you do?
Well, I mean, I think obviously, like, I think Puzzle Rush is a lot of fun, but I think it's not, I don't think that's how you become a much better tactician. I think it's just more of I view it as more of a recreational activity. I think if I really wanted to improve my tactics, there are plenty of, very, very difficult, tactics that are available. These ones that take people like 45 minutes to solve, but those ones are very, if I wanted to challenge myself in that way, I would probably go for those.
Gotcha. Okay, Nico, let's go like a little rapid fire on a few questions. Do you have a favorite game of yours?
Favorite game of mine? I'd like to think that my favorite game was going to come in the future. I think if I had to pick like that's a hard question to ask. I think I have my most like memorable game would probably be, I'd say I beat Ilya Smirin in the Washington International a few years ago, which was very satisfying because I was a nice kind of sacrificial attack at the end, but the quality of that game was not that high in terms of some mistakes that were made earlier. So I'd say it's hard to label my best game.
So was it the sort of thing when it was over, did you think it was high quality and only later find the mistakes, or did you know right away, well, that was hairy, but I pulled it out?
I played pretty well throughout. It's just that it was almost I think he just missed one idea, so it didn't feel like it felt more of as if he made just one small mistake rather than I kind of comprehensively defeated him, if that makes sense.
Okay. And what about do you have a favorite game of all time, like from anyone?
Well, when I'd probably have to say the Fischer Burn Fischer game, which is pretty legendary game with the Queen Sacrifice and everything. I remember when I was very young, I memorized that game. I don't know if I can still remember it now, but that game had a big impact on me.
Okay, yeah, that is quite a game. Played not too far from you, right?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it was Manhattan Chess Club.
Yeah. Cool. And do you have a favorite chess player?
Favorite chess player? I think almost everyone of my generation definitely admires Carlsen to a pretty significant extent because he's been so dominant for most of my life. I think when I was really getting into the chess scene, which was probably about 10 years ago or so, maybe a little longer, he was kind of just emerging on the scene as an elite player too. He was starting to play in Vaikanze and starting to qualify for the candidates and everything. So for pretty much as long as I've been involved in chess, he's been a real figure. And then obviously recently he became world champion and has since defended his title several times. So I think he's definitely a big figure in chess during my lifetime. So I think he's up there. And then obviously there's the kind of classical greats, Kasparov and Botvinnk and all those guys. But in terms of modern players, I think Carlsen's definitely, he's the guy to look at.
Yeah, and with him, he's kind of, he's kind of turned it up a notch since the World Championship. Do you get a chance to follow the elite tournaments as they're happening, or is that not a big priority?
I sometimes follow the results. I sometimes skim through the games, but I don't follow them seriously.
Yeah, there's only so many hours in a day. And Greg Shahade again. I think I had seen this, but I forgot. But you beat Fabiano in the Pro Chess League.
Yeah, I got a little lucky against him, but it was still fun to just play him, let alone beat him. So that was pretty exciting for me. Although unfortunately, he I think maybe 2 or 3 weeks later we played the St. Louis team again, and he made sure he was ready. So
right, yeah,
you get to see how competitive these games are.
Yeah, of course. I mean, beating someone like that once is plenty as far as I'm concerned. So it seems like you do well in the fast games. Do you consider yourself to be a blitz specialist, or is it just another part of your game?
I think that in kind of rapid and blitz and all that, it allows you to rely on your intuition much more. And I think that kind of if you carry that same approach into a classical game, your intuition is going to be just dead wrong on a, let's say 10% of the time. So in blitz, your opponent a lot of times doesn't really have the time to capitalize or identify that percentage of the time. But in classical, you can't carry that same approach. So it's a different way of thinking about the game.
Okay. And do you enjoy them both equally?
If I'm being 100% honest, I think that sometimes I enjoy blitz more, but I think in terms of I hate to say integrity, but the quality of the games, the level of kind of engagement, I think classical is obviously more strenuous, which is both a good and bad thing. It's more thought provoking. It's more engaging. Whereas blitz is more just quick, fun, but not as stimulating.
Yeah. And with everyone sort of debating chess formats, I mean, I guess this has kind of always been the case, but it certainly hasn't slowed down where people talk about chess 960 and they argue about how prominent a role classical chess should take in the World Championship in particular, but in other events generally. Do you have a sense, I mean, obviously you can't speak for like your whole generation or anything, but between your own opinions and like your cohorts, the other strong young players like, grandmasters and future grandmasters, do you have a sense for how they feel about these 5-hour games as compared to the sort of more fast time controls?
I think I think the the problem in analyzing this is that everyone has been kind of brought up under the kind of structure in which 5-hour games are considered serious and everything else is considered just casual. So people are just almost automatically inclined to think, of course I'm interested in serious chess. I'm not interested in this joke or this just fun, casual stuff. I think, I know Greg is obviously a major proponent of cutting down time controls. I think there's definitely value in keeping time controls, but I can understand, as both a player and a spectator, the value of cutting them down. But I think that there's definitely still a place for classical chess in the modern, world.
So you don't feel like, for someone of a younger generation used to sort of more instant gratification, it's not like torture for you to sit there and play 5 hours.
Yeah, I'd be lying if I said that it can be boring and sometimes just the length of the games and everything. But I think it's the quality of the chess is much higher.
Okay, yeah. Well, I mean, I'm glad to hear that you have sort of an open-minded approach. I mean, I think the chess world is just going to have to fumble around for a little bit until more of a consensus emerges. People get pretty heated about it right now. So
yeah, I mean, I've read some of Greg's blogs. I know how he's pretty passionate about it from what I gather.
Yeah, and then there's people on the other side that basically hate him just because he's kind of one of the most outspoken proponents of faster chess.
Yeah, well, I think one of his kind of proposals was basically to not denigrate classical chess in any way, but just more or less elevate rapid and blitz to the same level in the sense that it's 3 separate kind of disciplines, which I think if you look at other sports, like, for example, swimming, that no one decreased the value of the butterfly by including the backstroke in the Olympics. So I think it wouldn't really harm anyone to just have 3 different disciplines that players could just choose which one they wanted to compete in.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. That's a good point. I mean, I had heard Greg make that point, but not that comparison. And speaking of swimming, I know you at least used to play soccer. Do you still play?
Not too much anymore. I played a lot when I was younger, but in recent years, I've really cut down a lot on that.
So do you have time for any other activities, or have you kind of narrowed your focus to chess outside of schoolwork?
I mean, I'm involved in some things around my school and stuff, but chess is definitely my main thing these days. It's my main extracurricular, I guess you could say.
Okay. And what else do you have any are you a sports fan? Do you follow the news? Do you have any other subject that particularly interests you? Do you have a sense of what you would study in college, stuff like that?
Well, yeah. Like news and government and politics is something that I'm very interested in. Last summer, I actually had the chance to work as a Senate page in the Senate, which was
cool.
To basically just be there on the Senate floor, kind of witnessing history as it happened. So that was actually why I couldn't play the U.S. Junior last year, because the dates were conflicting.
So were you in D.C. for that?
Yeah, so I lived in D.C. for about a month for that. So the Senate Page program is what it's called, and I guess me and about 30 other kids from across the country were there working as pages, and they have a basically government building. It's called Webster Hall, in which all the pages live and get to live together and work together and just experience DC and the Senate and government like that. It was an amazing experience.
Yeah, that must have been a lot of fun. It's almost it's on a par with the World Youths, only for politics.
Yeah, it was just great to just be there. I was the day after I got there, actually. The president announced a nomination to the Supreme Court, so the next day, like, the opening remarks was the majority and minority leader were kind of addressing the I guess pros and cons of the nominee, and then there was it was during the summer, so there was no kind of landmark legislation, but you get to see just the kind of the way that the system works, and just kind of everyday bills that you don't hear about in the news, but definitely have an impact on people around the country.
And after seeing politics so up close, are you still interested, or did it push you away?
Yeah, it was. I think I was able to take a good view in the sense that it was almost a month there. So there were some days in which, I saw some things I didn't like, and there were some days in which I thought, this is just such an amazing kind of opportunity to change the country, help people, do all that. So, I think I was able to take a contextualized view that kind of took into account everything that I experienced.
Okay, well, I'm glad it didn't just tune you out. We need the younger generation to shake things up for sure. So, that's good news. Cool. Well, Nico, I'm thinking I've got everything on my outline covered. So you've got you finish up school in the next month, and then you've got the U.S. Junior Championship, followed by the camp with Agard. Throw the Philadelphia International in before if you can.
Yeah, that's right.
Do you? So you mentioned this PAGE program last year. Have you had to get a job at some point, or do you do any chess coaching? What's your approach for, like, have you had to think about money yet?
I've never coached before, seriously. I think as I get older and as my kind of emphasis on my own playing decreases, I might begin to kind of try to pass along the knowledge to the next generation and begin to coach, because I think it's very I've never done it, but from what I gather, it seems pretty rewarding in the sense that you get to see your student really grow as a player and become stronger. But I have not coached as of yet.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it seems like you'd be a natural at it. You're very, very articulate, especially for 17-year-old. So, I mean, you're articulate for any age. So, yeah, that would be interesting to see. Do you have any major chess goals on your horizon right now?
Right now, I don't have a specific goal. I think at this point, to set a goal of maybe 25, 50 FIDE or something like that, I think that's the sort of thing that I think if you try to just focus exclusively on the rating, then you fall into the same problem that I had when I was focusing exclusively on the norm. So right now, I think the best approach to it would just be to play, enjoy myself, and hopefully improve. But I don't think it makes sense to set an arbitrary rating threshold that I'm trying to accomplish in any specific interval of time. I don't think that would help me at all.
Cool. Yeah. Again, a sort of a mature approach. And one thing I should ask you before I let you go, when you were studying, like, how many hours were you able to put in, sort of at the, during your big push that you've made? I mean, basically over your, high school, even junior high career, like, how many hours a week were you spending on chess, do you think?
Well, I think my kind of approach to it was, I was definitely always very committed to chess, and I was always doing a lot of studying, but I had a very non-uniform study schedule in the sense that it would vary tremendously. It wasn't the sort of thing where I would do, an hour a day. It could go 3 or 4 days without doing anything, and then, do 6 hours on a weekend, or the other way around and just do a little bit every day. I had no kind of official structure to it. So I just, whenever I wanted to, I would do as much as I wanted, and then I wouldn't. It was not at all structured. It was structured in the sense that I had a system to what I was doing, but the scheduling was not structured in the sense that there wasn't like a specific amount of time I did per day. So it's difficult to determine how many hours I did per week. I'd say, probably between 5 and 10 per week while I was in high school, maybe a little more. And then when I was younger, it was more than that. But it has gradually decreased over the years, just as school and other things have become bigger distractions or priorities.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, again, I do think it's good that you maintain a sort of balanced approach. When you hear of someone like Parham Maghsoodloo, the top Iranian player, I think he's like 18, and I don't even know what his rating is, but it's let's see, 2660 FIDE. I don't know if you heard, but he said he spends 20 hours a day on chess.
I mean, I'm going to be perfectly honest. I don't believe him. I just don't think that's true.
Yeah. I think you're probably right. But okay, let's say it's 16 hours a day. Like, what do you think of a lifestyle like that? Do you think you could be happy doing that?
Personally, no. But I think that if he's happy doing that, he's obviously doing very well in the tournaments he's playing in. He's experiencing tremendous progress. And, I think I might have, I don't think I've ever played him, but I've met him because he's a year older than me. So he would always play in the same section as me at World Youth, and he seems like a nice guy. So, I wish him the best.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a different approach for sure. I mean, as you say, there might be a bit of poetic license. Like you, I hope there is. I mean, you need to sleep for one thing, let alone, maintain a bit of perspective with other things. But in any event, it sounds like he's pretty driven.
Judged by his progression recently, I wouldn't be surprised if he's really making a big push, because I think his play is really, in the way he beats 2600s, is just dominant. It's very impressive in my opinion.
Yeah. And do you, I mean, obviously, I mean, to me and to almost everyone listening, you've accomplished an incredible amount, but do you ever think, like, what if I had dropped out of school, or what if I didn't play soccer? Like, do you wish that is there a part of you that would have wanted to push even harder, or are you happy with the sort of balanced, practical approach you've taken and still achieved incredible things?
I'm very happy with my kind of balance in life as the way it is. Obviously, I've thought about, what level I would be if I had different things had gone differently, but I don't know if an extra 100 points would have been worth missing out on all the other stuff that I've been able to enjoy throughout my life. So I think I'm happy with the way things worked out.
Yeah, I think it's commendable. I think
thank you so much.
And thank you for coming on the show, Nico. It's been great to hear from the younger generation, get your perspective, hear how you've gotten so strong, and hopefully you'll have some new fans tracking you. So I don't know if there's a way for people to keep up with you, or they can just watch from afar. Is there any way for people to reach you? Or
they can definitely reach out to me on chess.com, I guess.
Yes. Sorry, go ahead.
My handle on chess.com is Speed Skater, I believe. So yeah, I think that's.
Yeah, I saw that. I was going to ask you that was. Are you a speed skater or just?
No, I made my first ICC account when I was very young. I think maybe 7 years old or something, and I can't honestly remember why I chose that. But at that point, I just wanted some sort of congruency between all my different online accounts. So several different chess websites have the same username. It's just a legacy thing from when I was very young, to be honest.
Well, again, you showed wisdom beyond your years in wanting a unified online persona, even at the age of 7. And it's kind of a fitting nickname since you're strong at Blitz.
I mean, a lot of people have asked me about that before, and it's always, I really don't have a good answer to why it is. That's just the way it was when I was very young. But especially people in my experience, people on ICC were typically more curious about it. But I've gotten messages from both chess.com and ICC saying, why is your name Speed Skater? But I think it's a fun online pseudonym. Yeah,
it's good. I like it. Cool. So yeah, I'll link to your Speed Skater account in the notes, and yeah, we'll be watching and rooting for you. Enjoy all these experiences. I mean, they're things that a lot of people, even adults like me, could only dream of, playing in U.S. Junior championships and working with GM Agard and stuff like that, let alone all the stuff away from the board that opportunities that will present themselves over the years. So we'll be rooting for you, Nico, and keep up the great work.
Thank you so much, Ben.
Thanks to everyone who helps make Perpetual Chess possible. That includes my producer, Matthew Passy, Geert Vandervelt for supplying the theme music, my wonderful guests, of course. And I also want to thank everyone who helps spread the word about the show, whether it's on Facebook, on Twitter, or on Instagram, telling an actual friend, an actual person about it. Every little bit helps grow the show. But most of all, I want to thank people who support the show financially. Without your financial support, this show would not be possible. I love doing it, but it is a lot of work. So I most of all want to thank Chessable for their support, and I also would like to give extra special thanks to the following people and entities: Quality Chess Books, the Capital City Chess Club, Andrew Bach, Austin Clough, Benjamin Handelman, Kathy Carr, Chad Oliver, Dan O'Hanlon, I am Dimitri Schneider, Greg Shahade, Guven Manet, Jens Green, John Jernigan, Kelly Palmer, Lone Pine Chess, the law offices of Stuart Katz, Sidney Andrews, Thomas Tachenko, and Todd Bryant. And I'd also like to thank the following Patreon partners. You guys are Aaron Wafflart, Ace Vallega, Adam Ralph of ChessEngland.com, Adam Vrancouge, Adrian Gutierrez, Alex Pejas, BetterChessTraining.com, Bill Moran, Brett Howard Lynn, Brett Zeldo, Brian Mullis, Chad Hilton, Chris Balcom, Chris Flanagan, Chris Wainscott, Christopher Bumgardner, Christopher Chabris, Christopher Wood. I am Christoph Zalicki, a.k.a. Chess Explained, Coach J's Chess Academy, Daniel Gell, Daniel Ginsberg, Daniel Lucas of the U.S. Chess Federation, Daniel Naylor, Daniel Schaefer, Dave Saylor, David Cramley of Chessable.com, Dwayne Edmonds, Ethan Smith, I Am Elect, Donnie Ariel, the Fox Valley Chess Club of Aurora, Illinois, Frank Tortoris, MD, Gary Andrews, Gary Lewis, Geert Vandervelt of Chessable.com, Gerard Barda, Giovanni Russo, Greg Nattel, Harish Srinivasan, GM Jakob Ogard of Quality Chess Publishing, James Bonastia, Jason Woolham, Jeff Anderson, Jeffrey Martello, John Fernandez, John Fontaine, John Hartman, Jen Shahade, Jerry Wells, JJ Strand, John Thompson, GM Josh Friedel, Kare Christensen, WGM Katerina Nemtsova, Kelly Palmer, I am Kostya Kovyutsky, Krishna Gopalakrishnan, Laura Boyavsky, Lucio Casada Silva, Martin Knudsen, Matthew Passy, Matthew Tedesco of SeattleChessMeetup.org, The Mysterious Moonmaster 9000, The Legend Grows, Mr. Mike Shahade, Nate Salon, Neil Bruce, GM Pascal Charbonneau, Pasi Passanen, Paul Bain, Paul Clarkson, Paul Sweeney, Paulo Santana, Peter Lux, Peter Merrifield, Randy Temple, Ricky Grijalva, Robert Steiner, Ryan Berg, Scott Doherty, Scott McKinnon, Steiner Lima, WGM Tatyeva Abrahamian, Thomas Stanix, Thomas Tachenko, Tim Brennan of TacticsTime.com, Tim Seymour, Timothy Ha, Tony Rotella, Tyron Price, Victor Vrancouge, William Peterson, Zhao Chang of Chess1000.com, and Zhivko Stoyanov. Thanks, everyone. Catch you guys next week.